Hey everybody. What have we done this week? Sort of as a recap, trying to figure out sort of where we are. Earlier in the week, we started with sort of talking about those phrases that we have listed in the book. There are a few differences, of course, between the older edition and the newer edition. The most important one, of course, being the fact that with our nasal vowels, we go from four sort of recognized, and in fact, even in this new book, we do still see it, but the three that they really stress are the as in vin, our on as in son, and our en as in sang. The one that is missing is our which is, of course, the basic idea behind the is that it's one of the basic sounds that we learn at the very, very beginning of the language. Un, deux, trois, right? We also see it in, just our indefinite article. So why isn't it included necessarily in this? I think it's because, again, this book recognizes that linguistically things slip, right? And that the and the often get confused, right? Are basically we run into some melting together. And is there a distinct enough sound for it to be highlighted? It depends, right? This falls under basically regional variety. But that said, right, what have we looked at specifically this week that we really want to work on? Well, this week we practiced. We did a lot of practice. We did a lot of discussion, and we did a lot of pronunciation, right? We talked a little bit about the fact that in learning how our pronunciation works, in learning how to read those statements, we end up with really a twofold challenge. The first one being, right, getting our minds to split the difference, right, between what we see in the IPA, for example, seeing what we perceive as a J symbol and an E symbol, and knowing that, right, in standard French we would look and we would say, oh, je, right? But in phonetics, that J symbol and the E symbol end up creating a ye, right? And so travailler, right? We will see that J E written out, but it'll be a ye instead of a je. And so trying to get our minds around that and working very hard at looking at and adapting to those phonetic symbols. The other thing that we looked at a lot this week was that in pronouncing these phonetic symbols and paying close attention to it, we often get really beautiful pronunciation, but we often then take a moment and need some time to actually process what it is that we're saying, because what we're seeing on the page, what we are speaking, does not connect itself with words that we recognize, and that we are going to be sort of working on tying those things together and getting that coherence back, right? We talked specifically about the fact that learning IPA is an essential part, I believe, and I hope that you will see this as well, of being able to pronounce well, of being able to read a little bit better, of being able to have better control over the language, but that it does not come as an isolated course of study. Right? Our IPA symbols are all good and well, but if we cannot make them make sense to us as we're looking at them, then it makes no sense to have them around, right? And so we are blending together our two different real-world parts of knowledge. The French that we already know, the things that we have already spoken, the things that we've already been pronouncing, the French vocabulary and verb tenses that we have, and also the phonetic pronunciations that are going to help us to improve our use of this language. So again, we are not doing this in a vacuum. We are trying to tie these things together, and it's going to take a little while. The first couple of weeks we kind of talk about breaking our brains out of one way of thinking about the language and into another, and then spend time putting it back together so that we can have both at the same time. We're sort of, getting sort of the least good of both worlds for a little bit, and then starting to put together, right, something that's even better. So, the essentials this week, and that we are going to continue working on, are the 4 phrases that we see, and the 4 phrases that they have written down in the book that are designed 1, 2, 3, 4 to introduce slowly, right, the phonetic symbols that we need. And we see that in the first phrase, we see a lot of phonetic symbols that are very familiar to us, that do not take a lot of relearning of, a different way of writing something down. They do take a little bit of time when it comes to actual seeing the symbol and pronouncing it right, as they will in general. But we start with a lot of basic vowels, basic pure vowels that are not super, super complex. We move into our mid-open and mid-closed vowels, the difference between our e and our eh, the difference between our o and our the difference between our and our and sort of how those are fit together. We then move in, right, to our nasal vowels, and we will talk about those briefly in just a moment. And then in our last one, we sort of catch up on everything else. We get into a little bit of our oui and our w. We again take a look at our y sounds, but we also kind of take a look at some of the words that we may think we have a handle on this word, and then suddenly looking at the phonetic symbols realize, wow, we haven't been pronouncing that correctly. This happens to me quite a bit, right? I will forget about certain words, and then when I look at the phonetic pronunciation of them, I realize, oh, I've done it wrong again, right? Remembering how to be precise and remembering to make that into something that becomes a habit so that we continue to maintain these good habits right throughout. So the thing that we're going to be focusing on this week, and into next week, is going to be in that first section, les organes de la parole et les symboles phonétiques. From the sections that we have looked at, we are going to be recording videos of ourselves doing some of these sections, right? We're going to be recording those videos, submitting them, and working on developing confidence. I am not going to say developing speed. I do not believe that developing speed is necessarily something that we need to do for many, many weeks, right? Having confidence in our pronunciation, pronouncing slowly and steadily, is a very important thing. Developing speed is eventually probably going to be something we're going to want to do, but having the confidence to be able to pronounce slowly and effectively and accurately is much more important at the very beginning. This is one of those cases where I have to emulate my high school music and choir teachers when they did say, perfect practice makes perfect. And look, let's not let perfect be the enemy of the good. But let's also realize that if we are going for good pronunciation, we need to take our time doing it. That we need to be able to look at our language and start to really focus carefully on when we pronounce an eh or an eh, when we pronounce an o or an that we feel those differences and that we notice where they are, right? One of the things I said that was really important today, that is going to be something that I think is going to be helpful, is when we look at the symbols, especially for our nasals, right? And we make those sounds and then put the air through our noses, right, into our nasal passages, we realize why the symbols are written the way they're written. So we have our eh, and then if we put that eh through our nose, eh, eh. We make the same motion with our mouths, right? Our mouths are in the same position that they are in for our That's where we get vin, right? We have an and then we put that through our nose, right? That's where we get our right? That's where we get our en chantant, right? That is the same place. And then our o, right? And our on, right? We feel those sounds transforming a little bit. So it's not unusual that E that we see generally, right, written as what looks like just an E, ends up becoming our sound, right? It's in the same location, and this is again part of what we do to learn about where things belong, right, in our own vocal, right, apparatus, right? That's what we're looking at. So another thing that we're going to be looking at next week is, as we move into discussing specific sounds, specific prosodie, rythme, we're really going to start leaning into the French, and we're going to start looking at this in French, right? The first couple weeks, it is essential that we start in English only because we need to develop the vocabulary, we need to develop the way that we're talking about this. But now it's going to be time to shift really into French and to be paying attention, the entire time that we're doing this, to talking about les rythmes, le prosodie, la prononciation. Remembering that when we talk about syllabation ouverte ou fermée, or when we talk about les sons ouverts ou fermés, that we're talking about the things that we're talking about, right? Open syllables, open sounds, right? Having the vocabulary to talk about things that are palatal, right? Things that are uvulaire, right? Things that are dentaire, right? Talking about fricative, right? What do those things mean? We're going to be looking at that vocabulary next week. So that's all I've got for right now, right? Make sure that you upload those exercises, right? At least 2. If you can upload more, it would be great. It's going to be good to, one, listen to yourself, but it's also going to be good for me to sort of hear how things are going. I already know that what I'm hearing, I am feeling good about, right? When we are doing this phonetic work that we are doing is already having a notable effect, right? The pronunciations sound good. When we really pay attention, it's really great. It's very helpful, and I hope that you're feeling the shift in the same way that I am. So I will talk to you all soon.